All right, everyone. In the interest of time, we will at least get started, and people will join in, I think, as they can. For all of those of you who do not know me, my name is Sapna Shah. I'm the founder of Retail X Series. I'm an angel investor. I invest at pre-seed in the future of retail. We used to do these events in person for obvious reasons. We were doing them virtually right now. We're probably doing about 3 to 4 per month, usually around this time. If you aren't already on the email list, you will be put on the email list by virtue of being at this session, so you'll get to know when the next ones are. This session is actually being recorded. It'll be on the Retail X Series YouTube channel. So if you have to leave early, you can find the remainder of it there. It'll be posted sometime this weekend. And last but not least, we'll be going through kind of a moderated discussion, and then we will actually have time for questions at the end. You can put your questions in the chat as we go along or towards the end, and I'll remind you again. And so without further ado, welcome Heidi. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Piccolina.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Heide Iravani and I'm the co-founder of Piccolina. And Piccolina is a kids lifestyle brand dedicated to children's and especially girls' empowerment. So all of our products are created really with the mission of inspiring today's children to become tomorrow's change makers and problem solvers. We launched almost a year ago. This weekend, actually, we're coming up on our first anniversary. And our most popular products by far are our Trailblazer tees. You might have seen some kids or maybe even adults in your neighborhood wearing our Trailblazer tee of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which has gotten to be very popular. We also have other Trailblazers from chemist Marie Curie to journalist and activist Ida B. Wells.
Great. Okay, thank you. So let's get started. So let's start with pre-launch, which is actually when I met you. So just to give some context, had you raised any money before you launched? And I think that's important to talk about because I think a lot of founders really worry about starting customer acquisition pre-launch with no money.
Yeah, and so great question. I was one of those people who was worried about it. I started the company by putting my own money in. So I invested my own money, and then before launch, but really on the cusp of launch. So we were already moving into the launch. The launch was inevitable. We did pull together a friends and family round, a small friends and family round. And that's brought us to where we are today, actually.
Great. Okay. So you put in some of your own money. You're well before launch. How did you start? I mean, obviously you had to build product and all of that sort of thing, but how did you start building like an email list? How did you start building the buzz? How did you get the word out in those very, very early days?
Yeah. Well, I would say that how I did it is not necessarily prescriptive of how anybody should do it. I did not have a marketing background. I had, my professional background was in very different fields. So when I started this company, I was really relying on my intuition and some, really intuition and some advice that I got from friends. So, our brand is mission driven. And so I really relied on that our play initially was going to be earned media. That was the most intuitive thing to me. And so part of what we did, my co-founder and I did, was we picked a launch day that was meaningful in the narrative of our brand. So we decided to launch on International Day of the Girl with the thought that because that tied in so well with our brand mission, that there would be a story, or it would be an easier story to tell about who we were. And in terms of generating interest, aside from building a buzz within our own personal networks, I mean, luckily we have, we've been around and had various jobs and been at educational institutions, and we reached far within our networks to build an early email list and things like that. But it was really friends and family. We also relied heavily on nonprofit partnerships with organizations that were working on mandates that really aligned closely with our brand mission. So, for example, we put together a partnership with the Malala Fund in conjunction with one of our Trailblazer tees that featured Malala Yousafzai, and a couple of other organizations that really focused on girls' empowerment. And all that was supposed to be this package that would really tell the story to the public upon our launch of who we are as a brand.
And so talk about those nonprofit partnerships, because I think what a lot of founders say is that, you're so early. Like, how can you even create a partnership? You haven't launched yet, right? Like, there's nothing, right, to show. How did you actually get those partnerships to happen at that really early stage?
It wasn't easy, and we got a lot of no's, to be honest with you. I think if we went back to pretty much any of the people that we talked to initially, it would be a much different conversation today. But having the conversation pre-launch, people were really responding to us based on their own personal interest in what we were trying to accomplish as a brand. And so we got a lot of votes of confidence that way, and perhaps got the bar lowered. And then we probably, in terms of committing a certain contribution amount for certain organizations, we kind of just went out on a limb and assumed some of the risk that, we would do that and get a return on it. In fact, we ended up not getting the kind of return that we would have wanted or expected. I think we were maybe a little bit naive about how to put together partnerships and how to make them successful from an ROI perspective. With that said, though, it's been immensely important in terms of our authenticity as a brand, and building our customer base's confidence that we believe in what we're doing.
Got it. And so going back to the email, so you said you and your team basically went to every friend, family network that you had. Um, what else did you do to kind of build that email list to create that buzz for launch? Like, were there other groups that you reached out to as well?
I think yes. I don't know how successful they were. So we tapped into our networks. So in this instance, we're a children's brand. So we and my co-founder and I are both parents, and our team members are mostly parents and part of parent communities. And these tend to be communities that are pretty networked and have things like listservs and Facebook pages. And so we really kind of took a guerrilla marketing approach of tapping into those networks and getting the word out that way. For example, I was all over. I mean, everybody at my kids' preschool probably thought I was super annoying, because I literally emailed every single teacher and administrator within the school. I mean, I was evangelizing to them about our brand, but they were actually pretty. I mean, they faked being really excited about it with me. And yeah, even today, people send me pictures of the kids from that school, like lined up in their Piccolina gear.
That's great. So by the time that you were launched, or sorry, prior to the time that you launched, were you also investing in social media at all?
So my memory is a bit fuzzy. We had an Instagram account, and we were not investing in any paid. It was all organic, and it was pretty bad, to be honest with you. I think, that's one of the things that I think we could have done better. I personally I'm not very social media savvy, and neither is my co-founder. So that was one of our gaps. And so we had a social media page, and then pretty early on, we hired somebody to manage it. But we did not put a ton of resources or attention to that, into that, like immediately before launch, or even like maybe in the first few weeks of launch.
Got it. Okay, so let's now kind of move to launch. So that was almost a year ago. You've had great growth since then. So let's kind of talk about more kind of step by step of how you kind of got there. So you talked about things you did pre-launch. Now, what changed post-launch? What were the customer acquisition activities that you added or changed, um, once you actually had product out there?
Yeah, well, so something that happened on the cusp of our launch, that was, I think, part luck and part our aggressiveness in focusing on earned media, was that we got featured by Oprah's Favorite Things 2019. So we knew, for us, at least, our strategy was about the story of our brand and what our brand stood for. And so we had pretty aggressively reached out to editors before launch. And one of those editors was Adam Glassman of O Magazine. We sent him samples, and he liked them, and it turned into them selecting our products. And that we found that out before we launched. So we went into our launch knowing that that was coming down the pike. So really, we were kind of our like on day one, our launch was pretty soft. And so we launched on October 11th. And then on November 8th, Oprah's Favorite Things was published. And once that happened, I mean, we had this huge, earned media momentum that came in the door, and we really just tried to harness that. So a lot of other features came out of it, and we were able to parlay that into conversations with other earned media sources and with wholesale customers, as well as bring people to our social media to build our following, build our email list. I think the issue there, and that we were able to fix this, but this was a gift and a challenge, in that it was a gift. I mean, who doesn't want to be in Oprah's Favorite Things, right? Like, especially as a new brand. But that involved a partnership with Amazon. We're a digitally native e-com, company. We sell directly through our site, but we were required to partner with Amazon, and all of our sales were basically coming through Amazon. So in our first quarter in business, if you look at a breakdown of our sales by channel, 90% of that was through Amazon. And as most people who are watching probably know, that puts downward pressure on margins. That does not allow us to control the customer experience. That doesn't allow us to control retention, to be able to talk to our customers, to really build the kind of movement that we want to build among our customer base. So really our big push was, after that first quarter of having launched, figuring out how to bring customers directly to our site. And that happened, that was really our initiative in the first quarter of 2020.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think sometimes early press can really be, it can be a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
But did you use the press as part of any paid social strategy?
Meaning like affiliate programs
Or yeah, or just what a lot of what I've seen others do, and I think it works better on Facebook than on Instagram, is to be like, here are these great press articles about us and our nonprofit partnerships and all of this sort of thing,
and to boost those
and leverage that into paid Facebook ads.
Yeah, I think that that's what we would have done if we had paid ads up and running when we launched, but we didn't. And quite frankly, managing the inventory and all of the fulfillment. I mean, remember, this isn't like, this is at this point, myself and my co-founder, just the two of us. All of a sudden, it's like tens of thousands of units. We're trying to manage all of the back end stuff with our fulfillment and Amazon. And we don't know the first thing about marketing. So we were kind of like, let's ride this wave as far as it will take us. I think a more seasoned, somebody with a marketing background, or like, maybe different advisors would have said, like, let's build on this momentum and put it into paid and grow it like tenfold right now, but we didn't. And also there were stipulations, by the way, with Oprah's Favorite Things. They don't allow you to put that logo or whatnot on an ad. So I think we could have been constrained in that way, but there are probably things that we could have done that we did not do, to be totally honest with you. So we started using paid for the first time in like the end of January 2020. So like 3 full months after we launched.
Months after. And then when you did start paid, where did you focus? And did you, was it really Instagram? Was it Facebook? Was it both? Was it other channels?
It was really just Instagram and Facebook. It was pretty much evenly divided. We actually, at that point, were seeing a bigger return on Facebook than we were on Instagram. And, we experimented with that and tried some things that worked, that didn't work for a couple of months, really. It wasn't until, I think, so we started in late January with those channels. And then it wasn't until maybe like mid-March where we started to kind of like really feel like we had enough data to start increasing budgets more. We also went through, a couple of different people, for not agencies, but there were consultants who were working with us. So there was some transaction cost, or like time, I guess, in transitioning between those people who are helping us. And then really in April and May, we really started to see our momentum build, and we were able to start testing with new channels and really increasing our budget in the existing channels of Facebook and Instagram.
So in that time between kind of like January when you sort of started and March where you started seeing some results, where you were really just kind of testing those paid channels.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like how much budget did you put to it at the beginning? This is a question I get from founders all the time. Like, what's sort of the minimum you need to kind of even test, right? I mean, testing with like $100 probably makes no sense, right? Um, is there any advice you can give to kind of our listening audience here?
I mean, we did test some things with $100. I don't know, if we would have reached the conclusions that we ultimately reached more quickly or more efficiently if we had done it with bigger budgets. But we were testing with really small budgets or, just a few $100s. And we would test, try to get data over the course of like a week to 2 weeks and then switch it up. But I don't think you need like a huge budget to be able to test what works. I mean, there even today, and we're dealing with much bigger budget today, but we'll test pretty small amounts of money for specific, campaigns, or even like if we're testing out a new channel and we just kind of want to throw a little bit of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get some data with $100.
Okay, good to know. And have you used influencers at all, especially in those kind of post-launch days, but even now?
Yeah, so influencers is really something that we've recently begun focusing on. So initially, our focus was earned, and we're continuing to build on that. Then we started with paid through, customer acquisition through like digital channels, and then we kind of came across. I mean, obviously, we know about influencer marketing, but it seemed kind of daunting to us in that the best known influencers are often very expensive. We didn't want to dilute the authenticity of our brand necessarily by doing paid partnerships. We wanted to make sure to get super engaged micro influencers who are aligned with our brand. So we started reaching out to people, but then by happenstance, a pretty big influencer just became a customer. And, this was maybe 3 months ago now, and she posted an entire dedicated story about our clothes. And I mean, we saw like we had a 24-hour, just a huge lift from her post. And so that was really the moment for us where we said, okay, you know what? We need to stop putting influencer marketing on the back burner and we need to make it a bigger initiative. So actually now we have some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pipeline in the next 3 months with influencers.
Got it. And you've talked a lot about kind of earned media. Have you used an agency for that, or from the beginning, now, at different times in between?
Yeah. So that was actually one of the first things that I did, but our experience has been it's not a silver bullet solution by any means. So, when I was initially starting the company, and even when I was in the concept phase and I was kind of meeting with some people in my network who are serving as sort of informal advisors to me, I mean, the advice that I got really early on, and I think it was good advice, was that really like we had a huge earned media opportunity because of our story of our brand and because of really this historical moment that we're in as a society and how much interest there is in the issues that we are talking about as a brand. So, but PR firms, a lot of them, I mean, their retainers start at like 15, 20K a month. That was not within my budget, right? I was bootstrapping this. So somebody put me in touch with a very small publicist based out of New Orleans who had helped her when she started her company. And so she really, she was our publicist. I mean, she was our publicist for, those first few months. And but it was not like a full service situation. I mean, it was really like having an advisor, somebody to direct us to, okay, here are the editors for these magazines and these publications. Here's who you should send samples to. We would brainstorm together. We'd have check-ins. And we're now with a different agency. They're a small team, still pretty small though. And they're kind of like an extension of our team. We don't just kind of like outsource stuff to them and like expect them to totally handle it.
It's interesting that you say that your original publicist was more like an advisor to you, because I think in many conversations with entrepreneurs, what I hear is that if you spend the money on a bigger firm early on and they're like full service and they do everything, you have to wait 6 to 12 months to get to see any results, and you don't have that kind of time or money, to be
Yeah.
honest. So this is kind of an interesting approach to kind of have a person versus an agency.
Yeah.
Might be able to help you and guide you, but you're still doing a lot of the legwork.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I mean, I still remember the day because this day was very impactful for my company. I didn't know it would be when I was like at FedEx, like packing up all the samples and sending them. And I sent it to Oprah and I sent it to a few others. That happened. I sent like 15 packages that day. And it was just this drudge work. I was like, I thought I would never be in this situation of like standing in FedEx for 5 hours, sorting, collating things. But I don't know if I don't know if there's something to be said for doing it yourself. And even today, we have publicists, and I find there's a different kind of responsiveness when I reach out to people directly. Like there are certain instances where, we haven't gotten a response from someone, and I'll say, you know what, I'm just going to email them. And I mean, I don't know. There's something symbolic for people. I think when you have like the CEO or the co-founder of a company, as opposed to somebody from a PR agency emailing you.
I think that's totally right. Personally, and this is of course years ago in my startup, we went through 3 PR agencies. None of them resulted in anything. But when I called the editor of Esquire magazine, we got in there. So
Yeah,
there is something to that about kind of the CEO calling or the co-founder calling, or at least someone on the team versus like an external resource.
totally.
Yeah. Um, Okay. And what about marketing agencies and growth hacking firms? I'm really interested in your answer to this, since you have said multiple times that you and your co-founder have no marketing
Yeah.
background. And this is a question really because I think a lot of times a lot of founders talk about like, I don't have this experience. Should I just outsource somebody to an agency who can like handle soup to nuts and does all the testing, and we just don't have to deal with it?
I think if that existed in a way that you could feel like you can actually trust the outcome, that sounds great. In my experience, that is not the world that I'm living in. So we've worked with, and I think another thing, at least in my experience, there are different, consultants, advisors, and agencies who will be helpful at different stages of your business. And so, especially if you're a new company and you're growing really quickly, I mean, we initially worked with one agency. It was really not, I mean, it was like an agency of like 2 people. So not like, an agency with 60 people. And she was great at that time when we were first starting out. But then once we were managing a certain budget, we kind of, that was no longer really the area of her expertise. And so we brought somebody else on. We currently, and for the past several months, have been working. We have a member of our team. She's not, a full-time team member, but she's one of our team. And she spends like half of her professional time on Piccolina, and she has a growth marketing background. And we really trust her. We meet with her. She's on our Slack. We talk to her throughout the day. We collaborate with her. We strategize together. We get into the weeds together. She executes, but she also has the frame of reference of having been in-house at big brands, like going through, from growth through acquisition, and then her own clients now, that we've been able to see that we can rely on her judgment, and we've been able to see that play out. We did, in full disclosure, we did bring on an agency, and we were very excited about it. And it came to us and she was going to be managing them, and it did not work out. I mean, we had brought them on. It was going to be at least a 3-month engagement, and within 3 weeks, it was very clear to us that we were not aligning on certain things. So I think, my advice about agencies, I don't think that necessarily means that they're bad, but I wish, and if we do it again with an agency, I think it's very important to be aligned upfront on not just the strategy, But if the agency is a good fit for where you are in your company, how transparent they're going to be about their processes, how willing they're going to be to get your input on their tactics, and even like setting up the analytics, how they're going to approach things like attribution. There are just different frames of thought on all of these things. And I think initially it was like, oh yes, we'll hire an agency and it will be great. But like it's more complicated than that.
Yeah. I don't think your experience is unique, to be honest. I think everyone sort of goes through that issue and learns the hard way,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, is there in the agency process when you were kind of vetting and then you ended up knowing pretty quickly that you weren't aligned? Is there any advice you can give on how you would know that you were aligned in the vetting process?
Yeah, I actually took some notes here. um, so I think like some of the questions that I would have asked, I think like some potential interview questions is like putting it to them to kind of reveal how they approach certain things. So, you know, understanding like what they think the challenges are that they would be dealing with an account at your company stage. What are the intricacies? How they think that their approach would differ 2 years from now versus now. How do they approach audience management? What are the audiences that they would target? How would they build that out? How would they approach prospecting versus retargeting? And how would they allocate budget between those buckets? Or how would they decide how to allocate budget between those two buckets? And how does that change over time? What would they be targeting in terms of CPAs and ROAS? So I mean, these are some of these questions that like they came up. We kind of had assumptions that they would take a similar approach that we would, or at least that they would be open to our approach. And it wasn't an alignment.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
So now you're a year post launch. You've had phenomenal revenue growth this year. Um, you and you're and I think something we didn't talk about is that you have sort of these Amazon revenues, as we discussed. You have your direct to consumer. You also have wholesale partners. Um, how have you been able to scale marketing through this time without raising any more money?
Well, we've been financing our operations with our revenue. So we try to make more money than we spend. It's a pretty old fashioned concept that is foreign to some people today. No, I mean, it certainly hinders our ability to grow as quickly as we would want, but we have still managed this year to double our revenue quarter over quarter, every quarter this year. In fact, this past quarter, our revenue is like, I think over 150% what it was in Q2. And we've been able to do that by testing and learning through our paid channels what works best and maintaining a certain return on our ad spend. I think also understanding, once we have some data, we understand how much, or at least we can anticipate how much a customer will typically spend in their lifetime, right? And we know what is a reasonable cost of customer acquisition. So that can tell us like what our CPAs should look like. And if they're not looking like that, we turn those ads off, or
Mhm.
we tweak them to get to a point where we're operating at a level of efficiency that makes business sense for us, so that we can continue making more money than we're spending.
Mhm.
We also have taken advantage of some fintech opportunities that probably weren't even available to companies like 5 years ago. So I feel lucky to be a co-founder in today's ecosystem. We've done production financing, for example, through a platform called Kick Further, that has helped us, not have to have these huge cash lays up front. Rather, they basically it's an instrument whereby you crowdfund the money for your production runs, and then you pay it back based out of the sales on that product.
Mhm.
Of course, there's a cost to that debt, but it's still like from a cash flow perspective, it frees up the capital so that you can do other important things. We also use Clearbank to finance our paid advertising. So that way it's not coming directly out of our checking
Right.
account.
Yeah, I think those are really, really valuable for sharing, because I do think it always comes down to, and in business like yours, if you use all your money for inventory, you have nothing left for
Mhm.
acquisition and retention. And being able to free up that money definitely really helps. Okay, I have two more questions before we go to questions in the chat. So if anybody wants to start putting their questions in the chat, I know we already have one or two. So what metrics, so you're in, a D2C business with inventory. What metrics do you track most closely in terms of customer acquisition? You mentioned lifetime value. What else are you tracking?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key metric that we look at, or there's two metrics, is return on ad spend and cost per acquisition, CPA, which is essentially CAC for us. I mean, so we also look at, you mentioned lifetime value of customer, because really we look at the LTV to CAC ratio to help us calibrate how much we should be targeting for our CPAs. So those are the three most important metrics for us, and like on a daily basis when we're looking at our campaigns and looking at the health of our ad channels, we're looking at ROAS and CPAs.
And one of the things we didn't talk about at all, which I gotta believe is great for word of mouth. Certainly, I've told a lot of people about Piccolina. Have you been able to harness the power of kind of word of mouth, and referral?
Yeah, so we have a referral program. We use a tool called Referral Candy for any of you guys on with your shops on Shopify. It is an easy plugin, and I don't have any easy stats on the returns we've seen from that, but it's something that we do see a return. We're able to track word of mouth that way and kind of incentivize our existing customers to spread the word by giving them a promo off of their future purchases. We're in the process of creating a loyalty program as well. I think there's a lot we can do on the retention side that we haven't been doing. So yeah.
Great. And very last question. So, what's the one thing you tried for customer acquisition for Piccolina that just did not work at all?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and there's nothing really that hasn't worked at all. I think the
Right.
question is, which has been good, but that doesn't, I mean, but not everything has worked equally. And so we're a small team with limited resources, and we've had to decide, what works best. And the stuff that isn't working as well usually gets less of our attention, or means that we need to keep, maybe rethinking our approach. I will say though that the thing that, in terms of customer acquisition, that did not work as much as I initially thought it would, although now knowing what I do now, I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but because I had no background in marketing, I really thought, in building this company, that our partnerships were going to be like this great tool for customer acquisition, and they really haven't. But we're continuing to build on our partnerships, and we have very strong give back programs today, and we've continued to put more resources into our partnerships, but we don't look at them as tools for customer acquisition so much as really a couple things, like a reflection of our brand. Our customer base can find cheaper clothes elsewhere, right? And cheaper products elsewhere. They're coming to us because they believe in our mission, and those partnerships are a part of our mission, and they show our customers that we're authentic. But also, I think, and I guess building loyalty would be the second thing. So retention. But yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest surprise to me on the customer acquisition side.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Let's
Yeah.
move to the questions in the chat. I'll just read them out. So from Taylor, what does that look like for a friends and family round? Is that 100K? Oh, this is going back to our friends and family conversation. 100K,
Yeah.
500K. Did you ask to fund for the first year with salaries or to prove demand?
I don't know that I understood the last part of it. Did I ask to fund with salaries?
So are you using did you use your friends and family round? Was it big enough that you could actually fund salaries for the first year, or was it really just
Yeah.
proving
So
proof of concept, getting off the ground?
really I mean, I guess it was really to launch us. I mean, it was kind of like we're pushing this off the ground. Like we raised a little over $200,000. That's not a lot of money for a company. Um, it it was a meaningful amount of money to the friends and family who contributed. But I think for some people, they'll pull together a 500K or even a million friends and family. But for us, it was a little over 200,000. And no, I mean, my co-founder and I did not take a salary for the first, you know, like 8 months in business. And even now our salaries are, I don't know that they should be called salaries. They're more like small stipends. And we do have a couple of other salaried people, but that's also financed with our ongoing sales.
Yeah. Okay. And can you talk more about ROI for brand partnerships and what you would do differently? This is back to when you were talking about at the beginning. What would you look for looking back, like to get a better ROI from those brand partnerships?
Like for brand partnerships or nonprofit partnerships? Because I guess we do have brand partnerships, and there are different kinds of partnerships. There's partnership marketing, there's like merchandising partnerships. We're working on both. I think we're still figuring these things out. I mean, one thing, with partnerships is to be able to understand what the ROI is, which is, typically a challenge in my experience. I mean, when you have a partnership, let's say with another brand and they're promoting your brand, how are you going to know that the sale that you just did was because of them? I mean, we try to track that through unique codes and promo codes and links, but those don't always get applied. So I think attribution is a challenge, and we're still trying to figure out what works best for us there. But in terms of an ROI, we don't have a specific ROI that we target. I mean, in general, we like to see, at least a 3x ROI, but obviously you just don't want to be losing money unless you know that you're really just trying to build brand awareness. I think it depends, whether you're focusing on brand awareness or you're focusing on conversions. And so at the beginning of any partnership, you should know what you're hoping to get out of it on that front.
Yeah, great. Armin was asking, what was the financing option for ads? I think you said it was Clearbank.
Yes, I use Clearbank. There's another credit card called Brex. We don't use them, but we've considered them. Shopify Capital also has financing for startups.
Yeah, a lot of options there. More and more options actually every day. PayPal does, so does Amex.
Yeah.
Okay, from Marche, how much inventory did you begin with, knowing that you would still be testing the market?
Well, we were beginning with a lot. We were initially planning to start with a lot less inventory than we did. So when we were going to begin by, and that will probably be dictated, frankly, by your minimum order quantities. If you are a business that holds inventory and you're dealing with a manufacturer that's producing at scale, most manufacturers have a minimum order quantities that you have to place with them. So we were pretty much just going with our factory's minimums, which was in most cases, like call it, I don't remember, but maybe 300 units per style or something. But then when we found out that we were going to be featured in Oprah, we actually had to go back and kind of, we had to work with a bit of information to try to make some educated assumptions about how much we felt confident we could sell through and place much larger orders. So that was an element of risk that we had to take early on.
How did you make that educated guess?
They being O Magazine put us in touch with people on the merchandising teams at Amazon that typically work with the OFT, and they gave us some very high level and very broad ranges of sales volume for like other similar products in the past. And we kind of split the baby and said, okay, well, if this is the range, let's land somewhere in the middle and assume that we'll be able to do that and take a leap of faith and place the order.
Yeah, that's stressful.
A little bit.
Okay, great. From Tiffany, did you incorporate or file for a business license pre-launch? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I should add this with the caveat that I'm a lawyer. So that, that certainly colors my approach. I think a lot of people will say, don't get hung up on the red tape and dotting your I's and crossing your T's when you're starting a company. And I do think that's true. But, one of the first things I did when I started Piccolina was I formed a simple LLC so that I could attach it to our bank account and our Facebook page and things like that. And I think now in today's Facebook landscape, that's even more important if you're planning on doing ads on Facebook, because they will shut you down if you're not who you say you are. But then we did convert to a C Corp just before we launched.
From Katie, are there any inventory financing options you'd recommend for startups that aren't at the threshold for ClearBank just yet?
Oh, Kick Further is the other one that I mentioned. Kick Further is, I don't know that I would recommend ClearBank for product financing, but maybe. And Kick Further is the one that we use.
And is it kickfurther.com? Do you know? I can put it in the chat.
Let me check it out. I think so. Yeah.
Kickfurther.com. All right, good. Put it in that. All right. From Camille, do you use Pinterest marketing? And if so, do you find this marketing channel better than Facebook ads?
Yeah. So we just started testing and using Pinterest a few weeks ago, and we do like it. We have found Pinterest is a different kind of consumer, at least based on my understanding. I mean, you see, I think probably less, at least we have seen so far, a longer lead time for conversion. It's really more, for us, it's been a better tool for brand awareness. I think especially coming up on the holidays, it offers brands a good opportunity to put themselves out there, because consumers like to go on Pinterest and get ideas and pin them for their buying lists for the holidays and things like that. So I wouldn't say, we do have a healthy return on our ad spend there, but it hasn't become, the primary source of our ad revenue.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, I think people think Pinterest is going to be bigger than it is for them. And I that seems to be sort of a trend.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there's some piece of it that depends on what exactly you're selling, right? But yeah, for us, that's been our experience.
Okay, and the second part of this question, and I really like this question, a little preface from Camille. I'm trying to drive my revenue to my first $500,000. How should we look at our revenue marketing ratio? Is marketing like 20% of your total revenue, 30%? I love this question because I think there are no answers in the early stages, but
yeah, I'm still trying to find the answer to that question. No, I mean, we generally allocate about 30% of our revenue for marketing spend. And I think you'll see it higher for some. I mean, I would say like 30 to 40% is a normal range that I feel like I see in high growth stage companies. I think it also depends on like what the rest of your costs look like and how much capital you have to burn through. So if you've got an investor that's handed you a check for $1 million and you can allocate, a third of that to your marketing, that's different than if you have to just use what's in the bank, like a smaller amount, and make it last longer. I think you might need to be more conservative, especially if you're also financing inventory.
Yeah. And would you consider any of the costs that you might spend on wholesale and getting wholesale sales within that marketing number, or do you split that out?
Well, to be honest with you, we've put $0 into wholesale marketing. So we're in boutiques across the country, and it's pretty much, we did go to one trade show before we launched. So it was like August of 2019. We went to a trade show. We got a few orders there, but we've gotten, like 55 new accounts completely inbound. And it's through our other marketing and people who happen to work or own shops or work, know of shop owners, or some bigger places like the Smithsonian who become customers and want to know if we have a wholesale program.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of ideal to not have to put a lot of money into that.
I mean, nice so far.
Another question from Arvin. Did you use Amazon Launchpad, or what do you think about Amazon Launchpad?
Launchpad. Why does that sound so familiar? I don't think so. I think I looked at it. We stopped spending money on Amazon marketing, and we've really made a concerted effort to shift away from Amazon. So when we initially launched, we had a dedicated, access to a dedicated team of people at Amazon, and we had a great experience and sold a lot through them. The margins were not great though, and that's not something that's going to change. But after the OFT program, we've had a more frustrating customer experience with Amazon. And for that reason, that combined with the margins, we've just kind of really tried to not put resources into marketing on Amazon.
Got it. If anybody else has any other questions, put them in the chat, but I have one more question, which is one of the things we haven't talked about is any of kind of the offline kind of stuff like pop-ups and things like that, trunk shows. Have you done any of those, or did you do any of those post-launch?
No, we were actually going to be, and it was, pre-COVID. So we launched, it was like mid-October. We were planning some stuff for the late spring and early summer. We had a couple of brand partners who had actually offered us space in their stores to do pop-ups, but that's kind of been put on hold. So yeah, we'll just have to see what the next year has in store for that, because I do think there are some exciting opportunities there.
Once people start going back to stores.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, how long did it take to reach launch, including design, product manufacturing, etc.?
Very good question. So I got the idea for the company in February 2018. I was working full time at another job then, and that I reached out. I contacted a surface pattern designer and began working with her on some of the early design concepts. Did my branding, did the logo, came up with a name, that sort of thing. Went to Lima, Peru in April of 2018 to source manufacturers. Realized what a huge knowledge gap I had in the space. Coming from, I used to be, a lawyer and an investment banker and work in tech, so I didn't know anything about this world. And so then I also hired, who is now my co-founder, as a consultant, and we worked on putting together the first collection. So that was, I guess February, basically a little under a year to launch. I also had a baby during that time, a third kid.
Yeah, some of these small things.
I was a little busy. Yeah. It sounds so simple now, but it was not easy.
It's not easy, I'm sure. Our next question is, what are your favorite customer interview questions, and which ones have given you the most insight?
Customer interview questions?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that is.
Have you interviewed your customers? I know.
Customer interview questions, like I'm interviewing the customer. I have to say we have not done a lot of deep dives with our customers yet. So I would actually love some suggestions for customer interview questions from your audience. I think things are always moving so quickly that we don't probably take time to pause and collect data, like that kind of thoughtful data from our customers as much as we could at Piccolina.
Do you survey them, like broad kind of survey monkey ones?
We do, but it's usually kind of perfunctory, like we're trying to make a decision about a certain product, or like, it's not really kind of like touchy-feely, tell us about your experience with our brand. I mean, this is kind of on our list of things to do, and it keeps getting dropped. And
you have a long list of things to do.
Yeah. We really do need to do it. I mean, it's really valuable. We get so many great inbound, so much great inbound feedback that's unsolicited. And of course that self-selects out negative feedback, but unless it's really negative, but people are very excited about what we stand for. And we've been surprised, I would say the biggest surprises for us are that adults would have wanted to wear our Trailblazer tees. that was not something that we foresaw. And then we started making them. And then we were even more surprised to learn that many men want to wear our Trailblazer tees. So now we're shifting the style to a unisex style. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
And this is sort of a follow-up of that one. So prior to launching, did you conduct any customer surveys or any kind of customer testing?
Yes.
Friends and family, other people?
Yes. So I did both with my friends, with Emily's and my friends and family, and then also through some of the parent networks that I mentioned. So we put together surveys and sent them out, and we got, several hundred responses. A lot of that was around things like uh, at the ideation stage and branding stage, as well as pricing our product,
Mhm.
um, that sort of thing. Yeah.
And did you find that those kinds of insights were different than maybe your hypotheses?
I guess the one, we got more. I think the one thing that surprised me was, and I guess this is held true, our brand really launched with a focus on girls empowerment. And in the earlier surveys, we did get a lot of responses saying, well, what about boys? There was a lot of pushback on the concept that I wouldn't have anticipated. And from our customers since launching, people haven't really couched it that way, but they've said, more like we should be raising our boys to be feminists too, and we should be inspiring them with strong female leaders too. And so as a result, our scope and our mission has you kind of expanded. And so now we have a focus on all children, but with this sort of feminist bent.
Got it. Okay. And what is your advice about brand and story messaging for companies that don't sell exclusive designs? Context, currently I source the best plus size clothing I can find, but I'm competing against other companies who sell the whole thing, the same thing. Sorry.
I guess, my off the cuff advice would be to ask yourself the question of what differentiates you, like what makes you special? Why are you doing it if other people are already doing something similar? And then, like, how can you communicate that differentiation to your customers?
Yeah, that's good advice. From Philip, what range of volumes did Amazon indicate that O Magazine was able to drive for similar brands?
I honestly, I don't know. I would have to go deep into the annals of my mind for that one. I would guess maybe like 50,000 units, but I truly, this is very fuzzy for me. I don't know.
All right. I think we got them all. I feel like I skipped one. Oh, did you create your own press kits and send them?
No, our publicist did that. And we did, though, closely supervise her in the content, making sure that our brand message was done in a way that aligned with our actual brand mission and our voice.
And this is a great question. How can we get on Oprah's favorite list?
I wish I had, I think the thing that was surprising for me with Earn, I just had, and it makes sense. Like all things, I had never thought before founding Piccolina, when do companies start designing their products? Like how far before they hit the stores is somebody really designing them and putting them into production? Similarly, when you read something online or you see a gift guide in a magazine or digitally, when did that actually come into being? When did the planning for it take place? And that was the biggest surprise for me, was how long of a lead time the gift guides like Oprah are. So I think if you're targeting a publication like Oprah or InStyle or Vogue or any of those big names, you really need to be thinking about pitching to those editors in the summertime, like June, July, August at latest. Because by August, those spots are filled.
Yeah, and that's actually really a good point too, which maybe I'll just reiterate on wholesale too. And if you think you have a really good gift product, you can't decide in November that you want to go get it into stores one day when people go back to stores.
Yeah.
There are long lead times for these things.
Yeah. Buyers are buying you know, they were buying in, gosh, I don't even know. They're basically buying now for they've already bought for spring, right? Like they've
Yeah,
bought months before now for
probably in
spring.
October. Yeah, that's all
Yeah. I mean,
happening.
this is changing now a little bit, I think, because of the world that we live in with COVID and changing consumer behavior and impacts on supply chain and all this stuff. But that's traditionally been the
What I
case.
will say, and I've had a portfolio company do this, is the online gift guides you can do very last minute.
Mhm.
So when you're not
Yes,
print or people like Oprah, maybe a bit different, but like if you would just want to get into like Wirecutter and like 10 best men's gifts or 10 best kids gifts,
totally.
those lists come out really much more at the moment of.
Yeah, we're still pitching gift guides right now, but we're those are all like digital things that like maybe are being put together at the last minute. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much, Heidi. This was
Yeah, thank you
wonderful.
for having me.
Really appreciate it. And for everyone else, you will be receiving an email about future sessions. The next one is about building curated marketplaces next week, and the week after is about fundraising at the early stages. You will also receive an invite to the Slack channel. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you all again next week. Thanks again, Heidi.
Yeah, bye. Have a great day.
Bye.